Next up, we have Dr. Terry Stoops, who's Education Policy Analyst for the John Locke Foundation. Dr. Stoops, if you will come forward, you've got about 15 minutes for your presentation, and we'll hopefully have a little Q&A. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you very much for having me. I'm Terry Stoops, the Director of Research and Education Studies at the John Locke Foundation. And I'm also a dad. And these are my boys. That's Ian on the left and Simon on the right. And I see Common Core every day because they're bringing assignments home, and they go to the Wake County Public Schools. And so as a dad, which is where I'll be speaking first, I see what Common Core is all about. Now, as a dad, last night, I had to take little Simon to get a breathing treatment. And I assure you that I will not blame this on Common Core. Yes. But as a dad, I see questions like this in assignments, challenging a second grader to stretch their thinking. And this question, while manageable in some ways, pales in comparison to a question like this, which is Stephen Hawking-ish in difficulty. Now, to put my policy hat on, North Carolina is not alone in considering changing, altering, modifying, scrapping Common Core. As you can see from this map, all the states in red are states that have adopted Common Core and are looking for a different path. So while we may say that North Carolina is in this, and it's a North Carolina focus, this is actually something that's happened nationwide. People are having second thoughts about Common Core. It has nothing to do with a small group of people from North Carolina, but it has to do with states having second thoughts, and North Carolina being among them. Now, what other states have opted to do is a lesson in what not to do when trying to tackle the Common Core issue in their state. For example, Arizona, rather than actually engaging the Common Core and reviewing it and looking at it and thinking about it, simply scrapped Common Core from their general statutes. Just took the name out. We don't want to do that. Iowa, instead of just scrapping Common Core, decided to start calling it Iowa Core, rather than giving serious thought to whether this is best for their state. Florida, God help them, renamed their standards the Next Generation Sunshine State Standards. Try to say that 3 times fast. In my mind, these are not serious attempts to actually engage the issue. This is a rebranding effort that is endorsed by those who support Common Core in hopes that those who oppose Common Core will simply allow it to stand. Now, Indiana has had the most serious approach to Common Core. They formed a commission, a legislative study commission, and they mandated a fiscal statement from their Office of Management and Budget, had public meetings, and they had a bipartisan committee formed, 6 Republicans and 6 Democrats, to consider what to do about Common Core in Indiana. And it turns out that when they came down to a decisive vote, almost half the legislators decided to boycott the meeting. So, the lesson here is that Republicans and Democrats don't get along when it comes to talking about Common Core. We talk about it as a political football. In Indiana, that's definitely true. But standards only get us so far. This is a study by the Brookings Institution that took a look at the rigor of state standards and considered a very simple question. Do rigorous state standards have anything to do with student achievement? And the person who conducted this study said, well, it doesn't really look like it. Statistically, there isn't a strong correlation between standards and student achievement. And the disparities that happen inside the states cannot be ameliorated by having rigorous standards. And the reason is pretty simple. Because standards are only one aspect of the instructional process. Standards form the goals, the big lofty goals that we have as a state and what we want our students to know and do. But it is not enough. It must be complemented by a strong curriculum. That's content, what kids need to know. Now, instruction, that's for the schools to decide. That's their area of expertise. It's not their area of expertise to start from scratch and to determine what curriculum to use over and over again. It is their job to ensure that they are doing their best to instruct students in the most sound way, the most reasonable way they know how. And then at the top we have assessments and testing, which traditionally has been a domain of the state. Now, as you remember, and you're going to hear a lot about this, is that Common Core is not a curriculum. Common Core is standards. And if this is true, then that means North Carolina can take control of its own curriculum content without ruffling any Common Core feathers. And so one recommendation that I have in a report published yesterday, and if you would like a hard copy or a digital copy, I'd be happy to give those to you after the meeting, is to start developing common content for kids. Why would we have common content for kids? Why would we want them to learn the same things? Now, what I'm proposing is not that we have excruciating detail on what kids know. But if we are having some students falling behind, part of the reason why they fall behind is because some teachers teach content that's relevant and some do not. The best way to promote equality in an education system is to ensure that all students are learning the same baseline content. And that's why I think it's imperative for any commission that's going to look at the standards must also look at the issue of content, look at the curriculum, and what can we do to improve it, as well as looking at this testing issue. We hear a lot about how many of the standards are aligned to the ACT, the SAT, something that really hasn't happened in the past. I mean, we had standards in the past that were, not to my knowledge, aligned with the ACT and SAT, and I don't think that is a adequate reason for us to stay with the Common Core as written, just to ensure that our students are learning something that's aligned with these college entry exams. Instead, we need to look at our options for assessment. And we have plenty of them. We can look at a testing company, something like the Iowa Test of Basic Skills. We can ask them to create a hybrid test for us with some questions that will enable us to compare our students with students from other states, as well as state-written items. Because the one thing that the Common Core tests are valuable for is that we can compare students across states, something that we haven't been able to do since the North Carolina Department of Public Instruction has written its own tests. It is valuable to know how North Carolina students compare to those with other states, and I contend that we need an assessment program that does just that. My two recommendations: repair the state statutes. State statutes do mention Common Core. We should not have brands in state statutes. That would be akin to mandating that the legislative cafeteria only use Heinz tomato ketchup, or that LAs only use Bic soft feel pens. There's no reason to have brands in state statutes, and Common Core is a brand. Next, a standards, curriculum, and assessment commission. It has been mentioned by several in the past. In fact, if you want to call this commission the Stoops Tillman Forest Commission, I would be more than happy to lend my name to such an effort. This is a commission that would include all the stakeholders, have open and transparent meetings, have a website that allows comment and that is functional, and include those from the private sector, the public sector, the nonprofit sector. Entrepreneurs, those who are in the business community and see for themselves the deficiencies of the kids that come and take a job with their company, would be on this board and able to address that content that they see as lacking. Members of the higher education community would also be involved, because they are seeing students come to community colleges and universities lacking some basic knowledge and skills. What better way to allow these people to ensure that our kids have the basic skills necessary for post-secondary education than for them to have a say in how the curriculum, the standards, and the assessments are created. So that is a proposal that I have more detail about in the piece that was published yesterday. I'm going to stop there, and if you have any questions, is there time for questions?
Yes, sir. You've done the best of all the speakers. You've got even time to spare. So.
I knew I would.
You should possibly consider a career in stand-up comedy. Thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. Members, do you have questions for Dr. Stoops? Well, it looks like they have. I see no questions. All right. Well, Senator Tillman, okay. All right. We'll let you go.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We don't want to let him off that easy.
Well, I was wondering when you were going to ask a question, but you didn't let me down.
Well, everybody needs a little advice.
Hey, you're my favorite senator, I tell you that all the time.
I love him too. Dr. Stoops, I read your whole piece here this morning. Maybe I got it before everybody else, I don't know, but I got to work early this morning, and I thank you for this pretty definitive work you've done. You highlighted some things that I think are important for us to consider, and I look forward to, with your help and others, taking a look at what North Carolina can do to improve upon what we've got. And you've got a lot of work there, and I would ask the members to please take a look at this, because if we anticipate doing anything out of this committee, we're going to need guidance from people who sit over on the State Board of Education side, and you all and everybody else. So I appreciate that effort very much.
Thank you, Senator Tillman.
Thank you. Dr. Stoops, thank you for being with us this morning. And members, again, Mr. Speaker, since you're not a member of the committee, but I guess you're the speaker, and so
yes, sir.
we'll allow you the privilege to ask a question or speak.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Stoops, you mentioned 4 states that sounded like were either window dressing or ineffective efforts. Can you point to any states that have gone through a review of Common Core and made any meaningful policy recommendations or changes in any of the legislatures nationwide?
Not really. North Carolina could be a leader in that regard, because Indiana was the one state that was able to get a bill through its General Assembly to actually do a review of the Common Core standards. So once they did that, they convened the commission. It didn't go so well. There's a lot to learn from what Indiana did. But to date, we have seen a lot of Common Core bills stalled in state legislatures, mostly because of disagreements between business community conservatives and Tea Party conservatives and anti-testing Democrats. So there's a lot of different play going on. So far, Indiana's been the most successful, and that was even a struggle. But there's a lot to learn from those states.
Speaker, do you have a follow-up?
Just a follow-up. Mr. Stoops, if you were the 121st member of the House and you were coming back in May, what, in your opinion, based on your understanding of Common Core and some of the commitments that have occurred as a result of past legislative decisions, what would your draft legislation look like coming in on day 1 on May 13th?
I think it would incorporate many of the same elements that I have in this outline, specifically enumerating exactly who needs to be on this board. I think we need a diverse board that includes parents and teachers, as well as the greatest minds that we have in our colleges and universities, legislators. So I go into some of that detail here, but time is of the essence. So if I were to draft legislation, and that would be one scary thing, by the way, I would make sure that this starts as soon as possible. Because if we learned anything from the Indiana experience, it's that even having a well-written bill, the process still lags. It took them a year to get through their initial review, and they're having to extend it for another year. So time is of the essence. And it's imperative that not only do we have two large commissions, one for English language arts and one for math, but substantial support staff, because this is a huge undertaking, absolutely huge undertaking. And the fact is, it probably will take 2 or 3 years to complete, but I contend that it's worth it. It is worth the effort.
Mr. Speaker, thank you for being with us, and I'm sorry if you were trying to get my attention. I don't have my glasses on. It looks like a big blur back there at the back. So we know you've got a busy schedule, and we appreciate you being with us this morning. Seeing no more questions, Dr. Stoops, thank you for being with us. And members of the committee, if you think of a question, again, when you get home tonight, and you're getting ready to go to bed, just email it to our staff. They will get it to the appropriate person, and we will post the answers on the website.